Hi, welcome back everybody. I am the French cooking guy and today I am teaching you how to make a brioche, a proper French brioche. So brioche is obviously a rich bread, everybody knows what it looks like. There's a lot of versions of brioche in Eastern European cultures, Jewish culture as well. The challah bread is very similar to a brioche. I promise you, if you follow this recipe, you'll have the best brioche, homemade brioche you've ever tasted. This is very delicious. So I start with the eggs, 3 eggs. Again, room temperature. Grams of milk, so it's really similar. I mean, that's not a big difference, but 120 grams. Okay, one thing that is very different about my recipe is I add 150 grams of sourdough starter that I have and that I refresh with milk. So I have here a refreshed sourdough starter, 50 grams sourdough, 50 grams milk, and 50 grams flour, all-purpose flour, white flour, and that's what I'm using for my mix here. So I'm adding 150 grams of that in the dough. Now, if you don't have a sourdough starter, obviously, what I recommend doing is a Pointage. So instead of using just the dry yeast in the dough, and some people, if you look at the usual recipes, they'll tell you to do a sponge, and that's sort of similar, right? That achieves similar results of having that richer flavor, that sort of yeast that has been fermenting for a while. So the reason I'm adding the sourdough is a bit more complex flavor profile, but also it drops the acidity in the dough so that it will preserve better, right? So brioche is one of those breads that tends to, because it's butter and milk, right? It tends to spoil pretty fast. It also dries pretty fast. So you want to, the sourdough also helps with the preservation because the acidity is a little lower, so a little more acid, so it just preserves better. Okay, so now the sourdough is in there. All my wet ingredients are in there, so now I'm gonna go with the dry ingredients. So right now I'm about at 450 grams, right? 300 grams of liquids, 150 grams of the starter. I'm going to add 450 grams of flour, 50 grams of sugar, 10 grams of salt, and then the dry yeast and a bit of flavoring. I'll show you in a minute. Okay, 0. Okay, dry yeast, 10 grams, yes. If you have some fresh yeast, baker's yeast, then use 20 grams of the fresh stuff. But if you're using the dry yeast, that's what I use right here, then, just use 10 grams of that. Even like 8 grams, actually, I use more like 8 grams. I feel like 10 grams gives it a bit of a fast... Yeah, 7-8 grams is definitely plenty for what we're doing here. Okay, so my dry ingredients are in there. So what I add now is a bit of orange extract. So this is, something that's pretty specific to my recipe. And when I say a bit, I mean like, 5 or 10 drops of it, that's it. And I also add a little bit of rhum. If you've seen my crepes recipe, I use rhum in that too. Now here you want to be a little careful because rhum can kill your fermentation. So you definitely don't want to add too much of it. So I literally put like a half a shot of it, like a small shot. It's probably about 2 centiliters. Here's the doses right here. So you really want to be a little careful when you do bread or fermented doughs. You can put a little bit of rum for the flavor, but just don't, overdo it. If you prefer vanilla to the orange flavor, I mean, orange is pretty typical for brioche doughs in France, but you can definitely, swap that for vanilla if you want that more like earthy, sweeter flavor. But the orange is really delicious. I highly recommend getting the orange for this. It's really worth it. 4 minutes. First velocity. Stop. second velocity. 40 seconds in the microwave. Let me see, what can I show? And that's a little too much. I should have done 30 probably. See how I have like half liquid, half still solid, and then incorporate a little bit at a time. So first, you know, a little chunk, and then let it kind of go in the dough. Just look at it sort of get incorporated. Maybe a little more than that. I can go the liquid first too. That's a good way. Again, a little bit at a time. I'm making a mess. Oh, so the butter is a stick total, right? So 150 grams of butter, which is just about a stick. Yeah, you can see here it's getting incorporated slowly, so just, you know, give it time. Don't rush it, just let it get into the dough. And then add a little more. It's almost like an emulsion, you know, when you do emulsions like mayo or béarnaise, hollandaise. Okay, and at this point, okay, so once your butter is incorporated, again, that took me like 4 or 5 minutes. I go back to a cycle of 4 minutes on first velocity, so this is this, starting right now. And then 6 minutes on number 2, on second velocity. So this way I have, so it's a lot of, you know, dough mixing, kneading, you know, for that brioche dough. It's just important to take your time and do it all. So again, I do 4 minutes on first velocity, then 6 minutes on second velocity, then I incorporate all my butter, you know, mou, how do you call that, like very soft butter, basically softened butter. Incorporate the whole thing, then go back to do a 4 minutes first velocity, 6 minutes second velocity before the dough is ready. Okay, I see you then. Alright, it's nice when this thing stops. Okay, so this is it. First 10 minutes, butter incorporated, another 10 minutes, 4 and 6, and now we're done. So at this point, this is what we got. Nice, smooth, silky dough with the butter in there. You can tell sort of that fatter aspect. Okay, so at this stage there's different schools, but what I like to do is I always leave my dough in the mixer for the first hour or so. So now what's gonna come, right? So for the fermentation, let me just clean that all up and then I'll talk to you. Okay, so at this stage the dough is kneaded, is ready. Some people transfer it right away into a container, try and fold it like boule in French. I don't like to do that, so I just leave it in the container for a bit. So at this stage we're off for a 4-hour total fermentation before we can bake. So the first 2 hours, we let it rise, so pointer in French, right? So we let it rise for 2 hours. In the process, I will do folds, like 2 folds total. Again, what I do is I leave it in because right now it's really wet and really fat, greasy. So, you know, I don't want to get my hands in there. I just let it point alone for like 45 minutes to an hour. Then I boule, then I fold once. You know, I take it out, put it in a plastic container. You'll see this in a minute. Fold it, let it rest for another like 30 minutes. Fold it again. I fold twice usually. Let it rest for another 30 minutes. And after 2 hours, I will shape it, and I'll show you that. So when we shape, we can do tresse. So, you know, you take like 3 rolls and you tresse, or you can do like little bowls and then just use that kind of like a milk bread, you know, Asian milk bread sort of shaping. So I'll show you both techniques since I have 2 loaves here. But again, at this stage, we let it rest for 45 minutes to an hour, and then we'll transfer it. So I'll see you then. All right, well, that is 1 hour exactly. So now I'm going to transfer my dough, here it is, into a container. And you can see now, let me see if that light is good. Whoop, whoop. Right, so now you can see that has risen a little bit and it's not as sticky. So I'm going to transfer it into a container. Okay. Alright, so that's what I use. Okay, let me manual. Okay, all right. All right, so that's my first shaping here. Nice bowl. You can see here I have some marks of fermentation already, so you know, really cool bowl. So I'm gonna leave it there. I'll do another one in about 30 minutes. Then leave it for another 30 minutes. Again, another full hour from now, and then I'll shape the actual dough before baking. So another full hour, and then we shape. Then 2 hours resting, and then baking. Okay, so 30 minutes passed. Let's check the dough and fold it again. So boule in French. We'll do boule. Boule is, you know, obviously a bowl. So we just redo the bowl. Look at this. Beautiful. So now it's not sticky at all, right? Look at how springy it is. This thing is almost there, right? So I'll do one more fold, 30 more minutes, and then we shape everything. And then we'll do 2 more hours of rising. You'll see. We're gonna do 2 different styles of dough. One is gonna be a braid with a 3, you know, strings sorts, and then braid it. And then one is gonna be small balls, and then let it rise for 2 hours and then bake. Okay, so let me do the shaping. Okay, for the one with the little balls, I'm going to do 8 small balls. Okay, so I started with a vague shaping with a bit of flour on them because they're still, like, you know, greasy and sticky. These are brioche dough, and then I take one bowl, so they, you know, you can tell they're like fermented, so they've risen quite a bit. And now what we want to do is like fold them on themselves. Okay, so you take one of them, make sure it has enough flour on it, and you sort of fold it on itself like a boule. Fold it on itself, fold it on itself, and you see how it becomes like shiny and a bit more sticky, so you can put a bit more, you know, flour and stretch it, and then once you feel like it's kind of strong and not as loose anymore, just like ball it. So you kind of close it on the bottom, right? You can kind of press with your finger, with your hand like this, and then that's it. And then okay, so here for the dish, you can grease it if you need to. That's some olive oil, so you can do a very small amount, obviously, just to grease the dish a little bit. I mean, my dish is, you know, a no-stick dish, so it doesn't really need it, but you know, if you have an older dish or whatever. And then the point is, yeah, you just take your little balls and put them in the dish. So you'll see how I organize it. I'm gonna do, let me autofocus here. Okay, so I'm gonna do 2, 4, 6, and then 1 and 1 in the middle. You'll see in 1 second. So I'm gonna do. Okay, sounds pretty nice and tight. Okay, and here you go. That's all of them. Just put the nice side up. And these are ready to rise. Yep. So like I said before, these are going to rise for 2 hours at maybe 26, 28 Celsius, which would be, what is it? Like 70 Fahrenheit maybe. So essentially a bit above room temperature. So the way I do it is I put a bowl of hot water in a closed oven and I put them in the oven for 2 hours with a bowl of hot water, oven off obviously. And that's the way I get, you know, that's a good temperature for those things to rise. I let them rise for 2 hours from now in the oven with a bowl of boiling water inside. Now for the braid, right? So now we have this nice piece of dough here. Okay, and we cut it in 3, do a braid, and then we can do a braid, you know, same way we did the balls, but now it's a braid. Where's my knife here? That's almost like rolling baguettes. If you've done baguettes before, this is pretty similar. You're trying to get that strength in the middle and softer on the edges. Okay, that's one. He's definitely still eating some flour, so that tells you that that dough is a bit wet, which will be fine. I can tell it's springy. I can tell it's fine. All right, ready for the braid. So braid, and literally what you do is you braid. So the initial, you know, it doesn't really matter for now. Just like kind of stick them together a little bit, like push on them, you know, like whatever. Doesn't really matter. And then you're trying to get that braid going, right? So 1, 2, 3, I guess here. And again, the beginning doesn't matter as much, and then here now, you definitely want that some of that tension going on. So here, you know, you're starting to shape it, and now it's really going, right? So you can just like shape it however way you want. This middle one is a little smaller, and that's okay. It's never gonna be perfect. This is homemade. Okay, and now you have a braid, right? A nice braid here, and then now I can kind of go back to my beginning here and get that tension out. What am I doing here? Here, here, here. And now I'm done. Okay. All right. Okay, and that looks like a braid to me. Okay. Again, you can just transfer that to Alright guys, so it is almost 2 hours later and it's nighttime and I'm very tired, so sorry if I look tired. Okay, so now we're going to prepare the egg wash and then we'll pull the raised dough out, egg wash it and put it in a 300-degree oven. Yep, for the egg wash we want an egg, a fresh egg, and about a good half teaspoon of salt, so a good amount of salt. You can even go a little more than this. And the salt for this is two functions. So one is it's gonna make the egg more liquid, and that's what we want basically. We want a very liquid egg wash so we can brush it on top of our bread. The other advantage is of course the salt is gonna give it that salty taste when you bite into the brioche, which is really good. Some people in France even put like coarse salt on top of the brioche, like as a sort of a ornament, to give it even more saltiness. So depending on your taste, you might want to do that or not. Some people, of course, a traditional way is also to ornate it with sugar. So that coarse sugar, like that sort of candy sugar almost on top. That's another way you can do it. Personally, I just don't put anything, just the egg wash, and that's what I put on. Alright, so just beat that egg until it's like nice and liquid. And here they are. So you can see how now they filled the whole space nicely. This is the one with the little balls, and that's like a perfect amount here. And then so yeah, la tresse, the braid, is here. Okay, so now we just, this one still has a bit of holes on the side, but that's fine. It'll grow into it when we bake it. It's nice and liquid, and yeah, there's no real, proper way to do this. Just go for it. And you want a liberal amount here. You want that skin to be nice and wet. Alright, so that oven is now at 300, so ready to go, and I'm just gonna put those in. Egg wash at 20 minutes, pull out at 30. Oh, one last thing I forgot. I do leave the water in there, so I leave that bowl of water in the oven at 300, so it just has that moist environment for the dough to rise. So you don't want something too dry in the oven, just so that that bread puffs up real nice. So I do leave that bowl of water in there. Okay. All right. I guess I can take those out. And here. This is like 89. That's perfect, right? So we cooked. How about here? Should be roughly the same, obviously. 88, 90, that's perfect. This is cooked. Now this is like the low end of cooked, so if you want, a toasty sort of a bread, you can go for it. Now this just came out. I can not touch it, it's still at 300. You can give it a minute, but then you have to take them out of those molds. You cannot leave them in there. You have to take them out. Give them 15-20 minutes from now, and then you can cut through it. They're still gonna be warm and fresh and delicious. Or you can wait until the morning, or a few hours until they cool down, and then you can slide through no problem. And this is some of the best brioche I've had in my life. That is true. I mean, look at this. Look how stringy this is. Can you see it? Can you see those little strings pulling? It's just stringy. I like it because you can literally like pull the piece apart in the morning, if you're in a hurry, Just break this apart. I don't want to do it right now. But you can just like break that apart and eat this. Look how stringy it is. Okay. Can you see this? Look at this. Oof. Look. Nothing better. Nothing better.